Telling a story isn't about perfection, it's about communication. It's about our shared moments together. Hi, my name is Jeff Price, and I would like to welcome you to Intentional Musicianship, where we look at everything that goes on at center stage and the preparation behind the scenes needed to transform your performance into an unforgettable experience. I am here to encourage you, support you, and generally have a great time being united together with you through music. After a wonderful performing career as a storytelling musician around the globe, my joy is found empowering musicians to find the freedom to go beyond the music stand and the fourth wall of the concert stage to better engage with their audience members. This podcast isn't a classroom, it's a brainstorming session, and it is meant for musical performers of all ages. Together, we'll explore performance practice, stagecraft, the nuances of storytelling, and the strategies for genuine audience engagement. We're here to discover what truly makes a live performance resonate. This week's episode is about eye contact with your audience. As I was thinking about titles for this, I couldn't help to think of other stories, and I keep thinking of a time in 1981 when I was growing up as a kid. And now this was a time for record players. And sometimes when you played those records, you had to get up and change the whole setup of the record player to change what you were listening to. Now you had these 33 RPM records. They had this small hole in it. And then other times you had these 45 RPM records. They had these larger holes and they needed an adapter. Anyway, that year there were two songs with the terms eyes in the title. Now, the first one was a Sheena Easton song called For Your Eyes Only. It was used as the main theme to a James Bond movie that year. Now, later in the year, we had this thing called Private Eyes by Daryl Hall and John Oates. Now, you got to remember, there was no streaming or internet at that time. And so we might ask our parents for a gift or something like that. And I remember asking for the Daryl Hall and John Oates song for Christmas. Now, when my mom went to the store, she saw the other popular song for the year. So I ended up with Sheena Easton. So she wonderfully gifted me this beautiful power ballad instead of this really cool pop hit. Now, hey, both are great songs, but I have that special memory of that Sheena Easton song because I remember my mom got it just for me. Anyway, I know that's off topic, but it's a fun memory I just wanted to share. So as we get started and we try to think intentionally about communicating with our audience, a really great way is to transfer skills you've already learned in life to center stage. And the really good one is just to evaluate how we normally communicate with others. Now, let me explain what I mean. When we perform on stage, we might get so wrapped up about selling what we're performing or playing the technical passages so exact that we sometimes forget that we have to bridge this gap between us at center stage through the fourth wall to the audience. I think that the easiest way we can do this is through simple eye contact with the audience. The funny thing about this is even though you might think that this is just a natural thing, it's a practice skill. At least it is for me anyway, and let me tell you a couple stories. And maybe you can use these to help see how you perform on stage and maybe help you brainstorm how you can connect better with your audience. You see, I grew up with really thick glasses. I was really nearsighted. So when I talked to people, I didn't have to look them in the eyes to engage them. I was able to hide behind my eyeglasses because no one could really see behind those 17 diopter plus lenses. Now, these things were really thick. And I didn't know, but back then on stage, I had another obstacle between me and the audience. I guess it was just my instrument. So the one reason I think I was really comfortable on stage is because I had the protection of being behind my glasses. I didn't have to really look at anybody. And I could hide behind my instrument. And to top that off, I was behind a music stand. Now, I'm a pretty natural ham, so I'm not saying I didn't communicate well on stage, but I noticed that there were some things that if I had tried to be more effective and deliberate in my communication, I might have been able to get my message beyond that proscenium. That's that special part of the stage that connects that fourth wall to the audience. And I could have broken through that part and got to that audience more effectively. Now, over time, my eyes got worse. And when I was at school at Northwestern, I was practicing to get ready for some auditions, and my eyes just wouldn't really focus. So I went to the eye doctor, and they asked me if I could, maybe just detour to a hospital and have some eye surgery. And it turned out I had a detached retina in my left eye. And then the next year I had one in my right eye. And then I got cataracts as the natural extension of having the detached retinas. And, in general, this all happened because I was just really, really nearsighted. So then I had clear lens removal to fix the cataracts. And then all sorts of other laser surgeries and things over the years to make sure nothing else happened with my eyes ever again. They're in a permanent position with scleral buckles and all the laser up against them. Nothing can change. When I go to my appointments, the doctor says, "Man, your eyes look great." Well, that wasn't how it always was. And the funny thing is, in the end, I don't even have a lens in my left eye. Who knew that mathematically, to have vision of 20/25, all you had to do with my really bad nearsighted eye was just take the lens out. And then the other eye, it's pretty good too. It's around 20/25 as well. The cool thing is that my eyes are just bad enough that as an old person, and many of you might be young, you might have to end up growing old and getting reading glasses. Well, because of how my eyes are permanently in place, I'm permanently in the position where I can see pretty well. I use glasses like for distance or when the night or if the roads are bad or something like that. But I can basically walk through life and I don't need reading glasses. I can see well and all things are pretty good. So that's just really interesting that way. And I remember way back when I had that cataract surgery and then I had all the clear lens removal and all those things. I can't remember. It's like around 10 surgeries or so that I've had. I can't remember now. I remember when I having that cataract that the doctor said, "Hey, this is going to change you forever." But in one sense, it's almost like you're 70 or 80. That's when most people have cataracts, but you're having it here in your 20s. Now, I didn't know that the consequence of not having glasses would impact my playing in such a profound way. So now let's bridge this long-winded story back to what our topic is. So when I was on stage with my glasses, I had great comfort and I had my instrument with me and I could sell anything. But I didn't know was that the effect of having the eyeglasses also affected how I communicated with people. And so I remember being at work and we were between rehearsals and I was in a work hallway and I was talking to a dear friend who's my daughter's namesake. And she's very influential in my life. And it turns out she called me on a habit I had developed over all these years of talking to people. But when I talked to them, I would look down and to the right. So she snapped her fingers and she said, "Hey, look up here into my eyes." Now, when I tried, it turned out it was a real challenge to me because over all these years, I was used to hiding behind these eyeglasses and looking down and to the right. Now, to this day, I still have to uniquely focus on people to look them in the eyes when I speak to them. Because I had 20 plus years when I started my life of hiding behind my glasses or my instrument or my music stand. And so when I communicate with people, either in person or with music, I really have to be intentional. So you might be thinking to yourself, how is this going to help me on stage? Now, I can honestly say that if you don't look at your audience or you happen to close your eyes when you talk to people, which is another habit I've done over all these years, they're going to be very tolerant. And they're going to use their communication ability to bridge some of that disconnect that occurs. And things will still go pretty well. However, one thing I might be able to do to challenge you is to consider what my friend Melissa told me to do and look at your audience square in the eyes and to see what the impact will have on your musical performance. There's lots of things that people say about, looking people into the eyes so I can tell if you're lying to me, or, looking into someone's eyes is like looking in the window of their soul, things like that. Now, the main thing is that eye contact tells me, the person, this human to human contact, that you're communicating with me and that I'm important enough to focus on. And I bring this up not only because of my past habits, but to share with you that you can go years doing things that you had no idea were hindering your ability to communicate with others. Now, there's a really cool book by Marshall Goldsmith, and it's called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Now, when I read books, I sort of put them into my adult learning model, and I use my past experiences to try to think of things I can use to better myself. And so this is a business book, and it's meant for executives to try to look at their habits and how they can effectively change and better their organizations. And one of the points of the book is that over time, your roles and responsibilities change. And some of the things that you did when you were younger, well, they don't work as well when you get older or when your role changes. And so when I read this book, one of the lessons that I've learned from it is that I can use that as I evaluate my stage presence or how I practice or how I tell stories, because some of those things I did when I was younger, maybe they don't fit my personality as well. Maybe they don't fit the groups that I'm in as well, and I can adapt to what is needed. Now, in the sense of this book, sometimes it will mention that, well, sometimes you might just find yourself in a position that you can't help yourself. That's just who you are. I know I'm, practically peppy in every way. My wife's friends used to call me Jeffy in a box because I'm really bouncy like a Tigger in Winnie the Pooh. So in context of this book, sometimes while still being true to myself, I can't be as peppy as I'd like, and I just have to back off a little bit. So I just have to do it a little bit less. So as we look over the next few minutes of things you can do with your eyes and eye contact and communication with the stage, if you're not comfortable with it or it doesn't fit you as well, you might find ways in which you can incorporate it into your performance techniques in ways that might help your performance and that you can just still be you. So I've told you about some of the stories about myself and some of the traits and things I've gone through, but I'll let you know when I go to a concert and start really looking, you'll start seeing everyone on stage focused on everybody but the audience. They might be looking at their music. They might have their eyes closed on stage to get inside that sound that they're creating. And every once in a while, they might look up and acknowledge an audience member for a second, and then they go right back. Now, I get it. As part of the culture of an ensemble, it might be the norm that you're focused on your music, or you're looking at other people on stage, or maybe you're looking at the conductor. However, when you're looking at a great vocalist or a thespian, they're always figuring out ways to go beyond that fourth wall, to engage that audience, to let them know that they're special, that they're important, and that they're really glad that they're there to be a part of the show. Now, you might find yourself in a role during a concert band or a symphony or a wind ensemble where you're playing in the middle of a section. You might not think that eye contact's important. Or you might find yourself in a position where you're in a very technical part of a piece where you need to really get inside it to make sure it effectively comes off to the audience. Sometimes you just really got to sell that art during the special performance. You want to be perfect. And I get that. However, one thing you might want to do is record yourself and replay what you see on the stage. You might just find that the person that you're looking at on stage with their eyes closed looks like they're asleep or unengaged or not involved with the people that you're performing for. Again, the audience is going to be very tolerant, especially with a lot of these cultural norms and things. But think about it this way. If I came up to you and started talking with you and communicating with you, and I was looking at you straight in the eyes, and in that conversation, I just started closing my eyes, and then I just focused inwardly on what I wanted to tell you with my eyes closed, just so I could get those right words, and I kept my eyes shut and continued talking, how would you feel as the recipient in that conversation? In one sense, it would be sort of weird. Again, I might know you pretty well and understand that you're just trying to get those perfect sayings to come off your tongue. But how much more effective, or could you build your brand in your audience, build that fan base, if I looked you square in the eyes and spoke with you? So as you look at yourself on stage and you're looking at things and brainstorming how you can effectively use this eye contact thing in a concert, you might have to figure out ways that you can communicate more effectively on stage with your eyes. There are a lot more things you can do with your eyes than just look at a conductor or look at your colleagues on the stage. I would challenge you that you got to find a way at some point as a performer to go past this proscenium gateway arch through the fourth wall to that audience. So as you evaluate what you're doing on stage with your eyes and sort of mapping it out, I've seen two things consistently. The first thing I routinely see is that when a musician is not performing, they might close their eyes. Now, they might be resting for a second or engaging with the others that are performing. Maybe they're just getting into it and they're just trying to be really emotional as they perform. Now, there's no doubt that if you close your eyes in a very intentional, deliberate, planned fashion to sell a particular section of a piece of music, I think you're going to be really effective. However, if you just close your eyes randomly on stage to give the illusion that you're emotionally connecting or to hide from the audience, then I think what you might be doing is coming out differently on stage than what the audience is actually receiving from you. Now, I used to have an old mentor in the flute section, and as we performed on stage, she would always close her eyes and tilt her head to one way or another while we were soloing on the front. Now, I know that what she thought she was doing was engaging the art and being appreciative of the sonic beauty being created by the soloists that were playing on the stage. However, on all the videos I have and all the pictures, it just looks like she's asleep. Now, again, I get it. The audience is very forgiving, so take this with a grain of salt. In some ways, when you try to figure out to connect with the audience, you're going beyond a norm of the culture to find a best way to communicate effectively with your fans. Now, the other thing I see is that when people are really trying to connect with that piece and focus on a technical or a beautiful piece of the music, they want to make sure it really sells to the audience and that they don't miss anything, and they close their eyes. I see this when people are playing these beautiful cadenzas. I see this a lot as jazz musicians play in a club and they go through their changes and creatively develop these beautiful new melodies on the spot. And they're doing this in such a dynamic, fresh way on the spot with the audience. But as they do that, what does it look like to the audience, especially over time? If it becomes the norm that when you solo, you instantly shut your eyes, you may have to reevaluate if a better way might be that you plan it out, or you take the opportunity to look outward and connect with all of those people that showed up to your performance. Now, I think both of these things with your eyes can work really well. You can close them when you're playing, you can close them when you're not playing. However, I think they're just tools in your toolbox. And I think you have to take time to evaluate what you're doing and check the frequency of how many times you're doing it. What are your habits on stage? Because you really want to be purpose-driven in what you're trying to say on stage. So if you're aimlessly staring into the audience, it might just be just as bad as keeping your eyes shut on stage. And we can just take this back to basic communication between two human beings. If you were talking to a loved one, you would probably be more inclined to be looking at them because you're building on that already existing relationship. And in the same way, that's what you're doing with your audience. You're molding, you're developing, you're growing that relationship with everyone that's come to your live event. Now, an objection that I might also have that comes up is that the stage lights are really bright. And I get it. Now, during all my eye surgeries, I always had to stare at this intense bright light as they did checkups on my eyes to see if I was healthy again. And I'm telling you, I got pretty good at it. Now, it's a trained event to look past your comfort zone and to the audience. Now, I don't want you to get blurred out by sunspots as you're doing things, but there are a couple things that you might be able to try. Now, in the book, Tom Jackson's Live Music Method, he mentions that you can break down the audience into different sectors during different events and different songs or different selections, and that you and your bandmates can maybe divide this up and look at various sections so that by the end of the show, you've actually engaged with everybody. And that's a really effective technique that you might be able to use to engage your audience. Another technique is a nonverbal cue that you can use to maybe make sure that you're giving some love towards your audience as you're performing. And this is like when you can turn your head toward them and maybe you just make sure you're focused towards that audience member or a section. It's like when you turn your body towards someone, like you're giving them a big bear hug and you're welcoming them into your performance. In many ways, that's very similar to eye contact. It gives you that warm, welcoming feeling that the musician knows that the audience is there and that they're really important. And I tell you what, this really works for anybody that's having any kind of eye issues or has any kind of physical handicap or something with their eyes. And again, especially if those bright lights are really going and you can't focus on anything, this warm, open posture and how you present yourself and how you turn your head and eyes toward the audience can be really effective. Now, I know this works really well. As I played for audiences around the country, I would always look out to people during the show. And this would be even in an ensemble setting. And they'd always come up to me after the show and they know who I was. And they'd say, "Hey, you were different on stage because you looked happy. You looked like you enjoyed yourself." Now, sure, I'm a smiley person. I look like I have a lot of fun playing. But a lot of it was I was taking time to look past the stage into the audience. Now, some other tips that I try to do is I try to find rooms I can practice in of different sizes. And I try to find where the audience would be. And I practice as if an audience is in the room and I sort of visualize it while I play. I might do that with my warm-up scales. I might do that with a piece that I have from memory that I can just sort of walk around stage and just sort of get used to things. Now, sure, this can help my musical contrast to make sure things are going well in the room. But it allows me to understand how I'm going to react in that live event. So I can be intentional in how I create that moment or that communication with the audience member. That's it for today's episode. We hope that some of the topics and issues addressed today will be useful to you as you move forward in your musical journey. I want to take this opportunity to say thank you for joining us today. We know your time is precious, and we really appreciate that you have taken the time to listen to us today. Consequently, we'd like to hear from each and every one of you. You can reach out and connect with us at intentionalmusicianship.com. My hope is that we build a community where we can encourage one another through our mutual experiences performing live music. I look forward to connecting with each of you again on the next episode of Intentional Musicianship.